The Director of U.S. National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, has hit out at the media for trying to create a rift between her and the American administration, including President Donald Trump. Now, Tulsi Gabbard has said that media reports had taken her testimony before the Congress in the month of March out of context. Now, back then, media reports quoting Tulsi Gabbard's testimony had showed the intelligence agency had assessed that there was no evidence of Tehran developing a nuclear warhead anytime soon. However, Tulsi Gabbard has called these reports to be fake news. She's doing this at least 2 days since this controversy has blown up. Now, in a post that she put out on the social media platform X, she said that the media was twisting her words and was spreading fake news to create division. She further said that the United States has intelligence indicating that Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in just weeks or months if they chose to complete the assembly. Now, Tulsi Gabbard agreed with President Trump that this could not happen. And the director's post has come after Trump, in response to a reporter's question on Tulsi Gabbard's assessment of Iran being years away from being able to build a nuclear weapon, where he had said that she's wrong, and he also said that he doesn't care what she thinks. Now, Trump, remember, rejected Tulsi Gabbard's assessment, publicly contradicting his spy chief for the very first time during his second term. Regarding Iran's nuclear program, Trump reiterated that Iran was a few weeks or maybe months away from possessing a nuclear weapon. In her social media post, Tulsi Gabbard also agreed with Trump's assessment and concerns. All right, now joining us on the broadcast, we've got Professor Georgio Cafero, who's a professor at the Georgetown University and also the CEO at the Gulf State Analytics. He's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Professor Cafero, this is an interesting controversy that is blowing up. A couple of days back, Donald Trump, in his chat with the reporter, said that he does not care what Tulsi Gabbard has to say about Iran's capabilities of assembling a nuclear weapon. And now Tulsi Gabbard is contradicting a testimony that she made to the Congress in the month of March, where she had said that she, in her assessment, does not think that Iran is anywhere close to forming a nuclear weapon. And now she says that she agrees with the assessment of Donald Trump. What do you think is happening here?
Yeah, great to be on your program. Thanks for having me as your guest today. You know, I'm not really privy to all the internal dynamics within the Trump administration, but this sort of seems to me, and my read on the situation is that the Trump team is definitely trying to present sort of a unified front and wants to try to prevent the media from paying more attention to what clearly was a rift in the administration over the assessments of the U.S. intelligence agencies that Gabbard, spoke to. The U.S. has for a long time, since 2003, actually maintained that there is no evidence that Iran is actively pursuing a nuclear weapon. And now that the United States is supporting Israel's war on Iran, which is being waged under the banner of fighting an alleged nuclear threat, it obviously puts the leadership, puts the White House in a little bit of a tricky position. And I think
Professor Cafero, just to interject there, the fact that Tulsi Gabbard is someone who's the Director of National Intelligence, she is someone who oversees 18 different American intelligence agencies. In her assessment, in her testimony to the Congress, she had said, and let me quote her here, she said that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and the Supreme Leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, she said that has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he had suspended back in 2003. This is her express statement of what she thought about the Iranian nuclear program. And now she seems to be agreeing with Donald Trump, who insists that he knows that Iran was very close to developing a nuclear weapon. So the question, of course, is this: who is now leading Donald Trump in the intelligence inputs he's getting? Because it does not appear to be the director of the United States of America's national intelligence.
You're absolutely right. And the answer to that question is Israel. I think it's useful to compare the situation we're in right now to the one that we were in back in 2002, 2003. Back then, when the George W. Bush administration was maintaining that there was this dire threat posed by Iraq's WMD programs. There was an effort to at least sell to the U.S. public that U.S. intelligence had reached these conclusions about the alleged WMD threat represented by Iraq. Today, there's not even an effort to do that with U.S. intelligence agencies. It's just simply Israel says so. That's where we're at right now.
I also want you to weigh in, Professor, on what the IAEA chief, Rafael Graci, said a little while back, talking about the Bushehr nuclear facility of the Iranians, where he said that in case the Israelis decide to attack the Bushehr nuclear facility, it could result in a nuclear leak, a radioactive leak, similar to what happened in Chernobyl. Do you think the Israelis who've been carrying out attacks on Iran's nuclear facilities are risking a kind of a catastrophe that unfolded at Chernobyl with their actions?
Well, this is an extremely serious issue that you're raising here, and I'm glad we're talking about it. There are analysts and scholars, researchers on the GCC countries who have been spending years looking at security issues in the Gulf region, and they have noted that the real Iranian nuclear threat to the GCC states would be some sort of a catastrophe with this nuclear plant on the Persian Gulf. In the event that there is such a spill that you're talking about, that would contaminate the waters of the Persian Gulf. And for countries in the GCC, like Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, UAE, that count on desalinating water, if there is such a spill, it's really not an exaggeration to say that it could make the major cities in those countries, Manama, Doha, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and so on, uninhabitable. So when we talk about the Iranian nuclear threat to the GCC states, this is really what that Iranian nuclear threat is. This would be an absolutely catastrophic environmental disaster.
I think that's a very significant issue which needs to be highlighted and pointed out. And the nations must, of course, ensure that common sense prevails when they try to stage these attacks on nuclear facilities, which Rafael Graci, in the context of Ukraine, when Russia had staged an attack on Ukrainian nuclear facilities, had said is in contravention to international law. Another issue, Professor Cafero, that I want you to weigh in on is a statement that Donald Trump made just about an hour back when he was talking to the media, where he said that Israel does not have the capacity to take out the Iranian nuclear facilities on its own. So when the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu started this war with his Operation Rising Lion, was he making a calculation that he'll start the war, but he'll then expect his good friend, the United States of America, to step in and finish the war?
I think that's a reasonable assessment. It's very clear now that we're more than 1 week into this war that the Israelis have failed to deliver a decisive knockout and to achieve some sort of decisive victory very quickly. And we're hearing from Israeli military officials, they are saying that this war might take longer than they had expected. And they are warning the Israeli public that this is a war that might be drawn out for a significant amount of time. And it's really within this context that the Netanyahu government is so desperate to see to it that the United States takes on a much more overt role in the Israeli war on Iran. I think the thinking on the part of Israel's leadership is that in order to really achieve Israel's goals, which of course go way beyond dismantling the Iranian nuclear program, but really dismembering the Iranian nation state and toppling the Iranian government, this will require heavy and intensified military intervention on Washington's part.
Right. I think that's of course going to be very significant, and we'll have to wait and watch as to how that unfolds. Do continue to stay on with us, Professor Cafero. Meanwhile, there are some new inputs that have just come in, where the state of Israel has now alerted its citizens yet again to run to their shelters. Now, the IDF has said that Iran has launched yet another fresh wave of attacks on over the skies of Israel. These are some live images that we are getting. What at this moment is said to be the city of Tel Aviv, where some rocket missiles appear to have been launched by Iran. Remember, this is something that's been ongoing for the last 8 nights now. This is a contest that Israel has got into, and what we're witnessing is in many ways unprecedented. Never in the history of the state of Israel since it was brought into existence in 1948 have we witnessed this kind of missiles, ballistic missiles flying over the Israeli skies, and also the kind of devastation that has been wreaked on cities such as Tel Aviv and Haifa and a few other places within Israel, which in many ways, according to a lot of military experts, has dented the aura of invincibility which the Israelis had managed to build up in the course of the last several wars. These are live images, we are told, from Tel Aviv. And we've got Professor Cafero with us from the United States of America. Professor Cafero, these are images that we just got of the latest salvo of ballistic missile strikes by the Iranians on the state of Israel. At this moment, Donald Trump seems to have kicked the can 2 weeks down. He's got to make what would arguably be the biggest decision of his political life so far, whether he jumps in this war along with the state of Israel. In your assessment, what do you think is making the American president have a second thought? Because 3 days ago, he said that he wants nothing but an unconditional surrender by Iran. And now he's again saying that negotiations is something that he wants to give time to. Is the American president being a little indecisive here? What's going on in the American president's mind?
Yeah, so just to be clear, he said this waiting period will last a maximum of 14 days. So this waiting period might not necessarily be that long. But to get to your question, I do think that there has been pressure from certain elements within Trump's support base. And I think probably there are figures, maybe Steve Bannon, for example, people who have Trump's ear, people whom over the years Trump has seen as important political allies who have maybe been trying to convince Trump that this would be a disastrous foreign policy decision, one that could really derail his presidency. And they have urged him to reconsider and to try to pursue a much more careful approach to this conflict in the Middle East that has been escalating since it started last week. And I would have to assume that some of this pressure has had an effect, possibly resulting in Trump considering the benefits of looking more at diplomatic off-ramps if they exist.
And Professor Cafero, because you're joining us from the United States, give us a sense of how this is playing out in the minds of the general American public. Because should the United States or should the United States not join the war is something that is going to draw a rift right down the middle, even amongst the Republicans. The Republican Party has this huge MAGA base, which wants to make America great again. It wants America's foreign policy to be driven by America's self-interest. A lot of people in the MAGA camp view this war as being in the interest of the state of Israel only and not in the interest of the United States of America. With that being said, how can Donald Trump keep his MAGA flock together? And can he convince the American people that this is a war that needs to be fought by the American people in American interest?
Yeah, so polling data confirms that the majority of Americans do not want to see the United States dragged into this conflict. I think both in terms of Trump's MAGA movement as well as the U.S. public at large, the politically popular move would be for Trump to not bring the U.S. into this war more overtly. I do think if he decides to bring the U.S. in such a manner, that would severely undermine him politically. I think many in his base would cease to support him, and the important consequences, politically speaking. We have midterm elections coming up next year. So I think that these domestic variables are going to be on his mind when he spends these upcoming days, possibly thinking really hard about what to do next.
I think that's something that we'll have to wait and watch for. Thank you very much indeed, Professor Cafero, for joining us and getting us that perspective there.
Thank you.